You ever notice how the people who refuse help the fastest are usually the ones barely holding themselves together? The rain hammered against downtown Chicago like fists on steel, turning the sidewalks into rivers of reflected red taillights and shattered neon. 61 stories above the street, the Whitmore Biotech Tower disappeared into low storm clouds, its glass skin glowing cold against the night sky. Claire Whitmore stepped out of the back seat of her black Mercedes with the kind of precision money teaches people. Sharp heels. Ivory coat. Phone pressed to her ear while 3 executives rushed behind her trying to match her pace. She didn't slow down for the rain. People slowed down for her. Move tomorrow's acquisition call to 6:30, she said calmly, climbing the marble steps without looking up. And tell legal if they miss another deadline, I'll replace the entire department by Friday. Her voice was smooth. Controlled. The kind of voice that made grown men apologize before she even raised it. Near the revolving doors, Elijah Brooks stood beside an open maintenance panel wearing dark fire department turnout pants and a navy thermal shirt with CFD stitched across the chest. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his shaved head as he checked the emergency elevator system for the second time that night. Something about the tower felt wrong. Not broken. Wrong. The alarms earlier had been small. Too small. Like the building was whispering before it screamed. Elijah glanced toward the executive elevators and saw the security lights flicker once. Barely noticeable. But enough. His jaw tightened. "Ma'am," he called out, stepping forward. "I wouldn't use elevator 1 tonight." Claire stopped just enough to acknowledge that a voice had interrupted her schedule. Her eyes moved over him quickly. Black firefighter. Work boots. Wet sleeves. Someone she categorized in less than 2 seconds. "Excuse me?" Elijah kept his tone respectful. "Calm. Systems glitching upstairs. Probably nothing serious, but I'd recommend taking the service stairs for now." One of the executives scoffed quietly behind her. Claire removed the phone from her ear. "Do I look like someone who takes the stairs 60 floors?" The rain crackled harder against the glass. Elijah noticed the faint smell again. Burnt wiring. Hidden beneath expensive perfume and polished marble. "I'm serious, ma'am." Claire stepped closer to the elevator doors. "And I'm late." Elijah reached toward the closing door sensor instinctively. "Don't touch the door," she said sharply. The sentence cut through the lobby so fast even the receptionist looked up. Claire's eyes hardened for half a second. "I'll manage." Then the elevator doors sealed shut between them. Silence followed. Elijah stared at the polished steel reflection for one long breath. Then every light inside the lobby turned red. For one strange second, nobody moved. The marble lobby glowed crimson beneath the emergency lights while the rain outside kept falling like the city had not noticed anything at all. Then the alarms hit. Loud. Metallic. Deep enough to vibrate through the glass walls of the tower. The receptionist gasped and dropped her tablet onto the counter. Somewhere above them, heavy steel doors slammed shut floor by floor. Elijah looked up immediately. Not panic. Calculation. His radio crackled against his shoulder. "Central to all units. Full security lockdown initiated. Repeat, full lockdown." Elijah's expression darkened. That was wrong. Fire systems did not trigger corporate lockdown protocols. Not like this. Across the lobby, security guards rushed toward their terminals only to freeze. Every monitor had gone black except one line of flashing red text. Access denied? One guard cursed under his breath. Another grabbed his phone. No signal. "How the hell are we jammed?" someone whispered. Upstairs, elevator 1 shot past the 40th floor without slowing. Inside the mirrored cabin, Claire Whitmore grabbed the silver rail as the lights flickered violently overhead. Her executives exchanged nervous looks, suddenly unsure how close they should stand to power when power itself looked unstable. The elevator jerked once. Hard. Then stopped. Silence swallowed the cabin. Claire pressed the emergency button immediately. Nothing. Try calling security, one executive said. I already am, another answered, staring at a dead phone screen. No bars. No internet. No connection. Claire kept her breathing steady even as the elevator lights dimmed to a dull red haze. This is temporary, she said sharply, more to the room than herself. Whitmore Tower has multiple backup systems. But even she heard the weakness in her own voice. Then came the sound. A low metallic thud somewhere above them. Followed by another. Like giant locks, ceilings shut one after another throughout the building. In the lobby, Elijah stepped toward the emergency stairwell but paused when he smelled it again. Burned copper. Stronger now. Hidden beneath smoke that had not reached the alarms yet. His radio hissed. Brooks, do not re-enter the tower until cyber response clears the scene. Elijah looked toward the sealed elevators. Toward 61 floors of trapped people. His jaw flexed slowly. Negative, he answered quietly. People are still inside. That is not your assignment. Elijah unclipped the radio from his shoulder. Tonight it is. He set it carefully on the counter beside the frightened receptionist. Then he grabbed the old flashlight from his turnout bag and headed for the stairwell. One of the guards stared at him. You really going up there alone? Elijah stopped at the steel door for half a second. Rainwater dripped from his sleeve onto the polished floor. Nobody should be trapped that high in the dark, he said softly. Then he disappeared into the red-lit stairwell as the tower sealed itself tighter above the city. By the time Elijah reached the 32nd floor, the air had changed. Not hot yet. Just heavy. The kind of air firefighters learned to respect because it always meant something was building behind the walls. His boots echoed against the concrete stairs while the emergency lights pulsed in red above him every few seconds. The tower felt alive now. Breathing wrong. Somewhere higher up, metal groaned softly through the structure. Elijah stopped near the landing and listened. No flames. No sprinklers. No evacuation movement. Too quiet for a building holding nearly 400 people. He lifted the flashlight toward a maintenance panel beside the stairwell door. The lock had been melted shut from the inside. His eyes narrowed. That is not possible, he muttered under his breath. Inside Elevator 1, the silence was beginning to crack people apart. One executive paced in circles, wiping sweat from his forehead even though the cabin was cold. Another kept pressing the emergency button every 10 seconds like panic could force technology to answer. Claire stood near the mirrored wall with her arms folded tightly across her coat. Calm on the outside. Barely. She hated confined spaces. Hated them enough that nobody in her company knew about it. Not the board. Not the press. Not even the assistant who managed every hour of her life. Because fear looked expensive on powerful women. Another sharp thud echoed somewhere through the shaft above them. The elevator lights flickered again. One of the women inside gasped quietly. What if there is a fire? Claire answered immediately. There is no fire. But her voice came too fast this time. Too sharp. Like she was trying to silence herself more than anyone else. Then the ventilation system shut off. The cabin became still. Completely still. No airflow. No hum of machinery. Just breathing. Human breathing. Somebody whispered a prayer under their breath. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. Just one. And suddenly she saw herself at 11 years old trapped inside a broken ski lift over Aspen while her father shouted at the operators below. She remembered the cold. The shaking cables. The feeling of being suspended somewhere between safety and humiliation while adults failed around her. She opened her eyes hard enough to kill the memory. Everyone needs to stay rational, she said quietly. Then a new sound reached them. Faint at first. Metal against concrete. Slow footsteps climbing upward through the emergency stairwell beside the shaft. One of the executives looked toward the ceiling. Did you hear that? Claire held her breath. The footsteps grew louder. Steady. Unhurried. Not rescue sirens. Not panic. Just one person moving through 60 stories of darkness like he already understood the building better than the people who owned it. Down below, lightning flashed across Chicago's skyline while rain crawled down the tower windows in silver streams. And somewhere inside all that steel and red emergency light, Claire Whitmore realized something she had never needed to feel before. She was completely dependent on someone she had dismissed less than 10 minutes earlier. Elijah reached the 47th floor when the first traces of smoke finally appeared beneath the emergency lights. Thin. Gray. Moving low across the hallway like the building was trying to hide it. He crouched near the vent beside the stairwell door and pressed the back of his hand against the metal grate. Warm. Too warm. But still no active fire alarms beyond the lockdown sequence. None of it matched. Buildings made mistakes sometimes. Systems failed. But systems did not lie this carefully unless somebody taught them how. Elijah stood slowly and adjusted the flashlight beneath his arm. Around his wrist, the faded pink bracelet his daughter made at summer camp brushed against the sleeve of his turnout jacket. "Be safe, Daddy." The tiny letters had almost worn away after 2 years. He touched it once with his thumb before pushing through the next stairwell door. Upstairs, inside the stalled elevator, breathing had become the loudest sound in the cabin. One executive loosened his tie with trembling fingers while another sat against the mirrored wall trying not to look afraid. Claire remained standing because sitting felt too close to surrender. The air had turned warmer now without ventilation. Her pulse kept matching the faint red flicker above them. Slow. Then fast. Then slow again. One woman suddenly pressed both hands against her chest. "I cannot breathe in here." Claire turned immediately. "Look at me," she said firmly. "You are breathing. Stay with me." But the woman's panic only grew. Small spaces do that. Fear spreads faster than smoke when people feel trapped. Then came the sound again. Closer now. Heavy boots against steel stairs. Deliberate. Steady. The elevator ceiling vibrated faintly as someone stopped just outside the emergency access door beside the shaft. Silence followed for one long second. Then a voice. Calm. Low. Familiar. "Everybody inside elevator 1?" Claire closed her eyes briefly at the sound of it. One of the executives nearly shouted back. "Yes. We are stuck in here." Metal scraped outside the hatch. Elijah's flashlight beam cut through the narrow crack above them. Dust drifted down through the red emergency glow. "Step away from the doors," he said. "I need room to override the lock." Claire moved first this time. No hesitation. No sharp reply. She guided the others backward quietly while listening to the sounds outside. Tools moving. Steel resisting. The elevator suddenly jerked half an inch downward and one of the executives cursed in panic. "Easy," Elijah called through the hatch immediately. His voice never rose. "Nobody moves fast. The car is stable." Stable. Such a simple word. Yet somehow the moment he said it, the entire elevator breathed differently. Claire noticed it immediately. The room had not become safer. But it felt safer because somebody outside the walls sounded unafraid. A loud mechanical click echoed above them. Then another. Finally the elevator doors shuddered apart 3 inches before stopping hard again. Smoke curled through the opening. Elijah's face appeared between the gap beneath the red light. Sweat across his forehead. Flashlight clipped to his shoulder. Eyes calm despite 60 floors of chaos around him. He looked directly at Claire for half a second. Not angry. Not smug. Just steady. "Still think the stairs were a bad idea?" he asked quietly. For a second, nobody inside the elevator answered him. Not because they did not hear him. Because shame has a way of making silence louder. Claire Whitmore looked at the narrow opening between the steel doors and saw rainwater still dripping from Elijah Brooks's sleeve onto the elevator frame. He had climbed nearly 50 floors through smoke and darkness while everyone else downstairs waited for instructions from people behind computer screens. And somehow he still sounded calm. One of the executives let out a nervous laugh. You came up here alone? Elijah wedged the emergency pry bar deeper into the door seam. Not much room for a marching band in the stairwell. The metal groaned again before the gap widened enough for fresh air to push into the cabin. Everybody inhaled at once. Claire did not realize how badly her lungs needed that breath until it hit her chest. Elijah scanned the people inside quickly, counting faces, checking posture, looking for shock before panic became dangerous. His eyes stopped briefly on the woman crouched near the corner, still fighting to steady her breathing. You with the gray jacket, he said gently. Look at me for a second. The woman lifted trembling eyes toward the gap. Elijah's voice stayed low, measured. You are not trapped forever. You are uncomfortable right now. Big difference. Her breathing slowed slightly. Good, he continued. Now match my pace. In through your nose. Slow out. Claire watched the woman follow him almost immediately. Strange. The same instructions would have sounded rehearsed coming from a corporate wellness consultant. Coming from Elijah, they sounded real. Because he believed them himself. Another loud thud echoed somewhere above the shaft. Dust fell from the ceiling vents. Elijah looked upward instantly. His expression shifted for the first time since reaching the elevator. Not fear. Focus. We need to move. Claire stepped toward the opening. Can you get us out? Yes, ma'am, he answered. Then, after the smallest pause, but we do it my way. Normally those words would have irritated her. Nobody spoke to Claire Whitmore that way inside her own building. Yet now, standing inside a stalled elevator painted red by emergency lights, she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Elijah forced the doors wider until there was enough space for people to squeeze through one at a time into the maintenance corridor beside the shaft. The executives rushed forward immediately. Elijah raised one hand. Not aggressive. Just firm. Nobody pushes. They stopped. Even Claire noticed it. He never raised his voice. Yet people listened anyway. One by one they climbed through the opening carefully. Elijah stayed planted beside the gap, steadying each person with one gloved hand against the steel frame. When Claire's turn came, she hesitated briefly at the narrow opening between the elevator and the corridor ledge. 50 stories above the city. Red lights. Smoke thickening somewhere deeper in the tower. Elijah noticed her pause immediately. Floor is stable, he said quietly. I will not let you fall. The words landed harder than they should have. Claire nodded once and stepped through. Her heel slipped slightly against the metal edge before Elijah caught her forearm instantly. Warm grip. Strong. Controlled. He released her the second she regained balance. No lingering. No performance. Just instinct. Claire looked up at him in the dim, emergency light. There was soot across his jaw now. Sweat along his forehead. Exhaustion hidden beneath discipline. Yet his eyes remained steady. Human. Somewhere beyond the walls, the storm rolled across Chicago with another low growl of thunder. Then every emergency light in the corridor flickered at once. Elijah turned toward the dark hallway ahead. His expression hardened. That is not smoke causing this, he said softly. Somebody inside this building wants the systems dead. The corridor beyond the elevator looked nothing like the polished executive floors shown in Whitmore biotech advertisements. No marble. No soft lighting. Just exposed steel beams, emergency pipes running along concrete walls, and red backup lights pulsing through smoke that moved lazily near the ceiling. Elijah led the group forward with the flashlight low and steady, keeping the beam aimed at the floor so nobody lost footing. Single line, he said quietly. Stay near the wall. Nobody argued. Not anymore. Claire walked directly behind him now. Close enough to hear the controlled rhythm of his breathing beneath the distant alarms. Close enough to notice the way he checked every doorway before allowing the others forward. He moved like someone carrying responsibility instead of authority. There was a difference. Halfway down the corridor, Elijah suddenly stopped. His fist lifted slightly in the air. Everyone froze instinctively. Claire looked past his shoulder toward a maintenance terminal blinking beside the wall panel. The screen flashed lines of corrupted code beneath the emergency system logo. Lockdown active. Oxygen management initiated. Elijah stepped closer. His eyes narrowed. That should not be connected to fire response. One executive swallowed hard. What does that mean? Elijah did not answer immediately. He scanned the hallway once more before crouching near the terminal. Smoke curled faintly through the vent above them now. It means somebody tied building security into environmental controls, he said finally. If the system fully purges, airflow shuts down floor by floor. Silence hit the group harder than the alarms ever had. One of the women covered her mouth. Another whispered, "Dear God." Claire stared at the flashing screen as cold pressure settled into her chest. Whitmore Tower was supposed to be impossible to breach. The safest biotech facility in the Midwest. She had spent years selling that promise to investors, government contracts, everyone. Yet now the building felt less like a fortress and more like a trap someone designed carefully from the inside. Elijah unplugged the terminal panel and stood again. We keep moving. Where? An executive asked quickly. There is a backup evacuation route on 52, Elijah answered. Old service access. Not connected to central lockdown. How do you know that? Claire asked before she could stop herself. Elijah glanced back at her briefly while adjusting the flashlight strap on his shoulder. Because firefighters learn buildings the way other people learn neighborhoods. Then he started walking again. The corridor narrowed ahead of them, while the smoke thickened slightly around the ceiling pipes. Somewhere deeper inside the tower, machinery groaned under strain. Claire kept her eyes on Elijah's back as they moved. The dark turnout jacket. The soot along his collar. The pink bracelet brushing against his wrist every time he lifted the flashlight. Such a small thing inside all this chaos. Yet, she could not stop noticing it. You have kids? She asked quietly. Elijah slowed just enough to answer without turning around. One daughter. How old? 9 next month. Something softened briefly in his voice when he said it. Not enough to weaken him. Just enough to reveal there was a life waiting for him beyond this building. Claire looked down at her own hands. Empty except for a phone with no signal and a diamond watch that suddenly felt useless. Ahead of them, the corridor lights flickered violently before half the hallway dropped into darkness. Somebody behind Claire gasped. Elijah stopped immediately and turned toward the group. Everybody look at me. His voice cut clean through the fear. Calm. Grounded. Not the lights. Me. The flashlight beam steadied against the wall beside him. Fear spreads fast in the dark, he said quietly. So we moved together. Claire realized then that the strangest thing about Elijah Brooks was not his courage. It was how safe people felt standing near him while everything else was falling apart. The farther they moved from the executive floors, the stranger the tower became. Smoke drifted through narrow maintenance corridors and thin ribbons while emergency lights blinked weakly overhead like a heartbeat losing rhythm. Somewhere beyond the walls, servers hummed beneath the building with the low mechanical sound of millions of dollars trying to stay alive. Elijah checked the next security door and frowned immediately. The magnetic lock had been fused shut manually from the control side. Not damaged. Overridden. This was planned, he said quietly. Claire stepped closer beside him. You are sure? Elijah looked at the melted circuit panel for one long second before nodding. Fires spread messy. This is clean. The words settled heavy in the corridor. One executive muttered something under his breath about lawsuits and federal investigations, but nobody really listened anymore. Fear had stripped everyone down to simpler things now. Air. Light. Following the man who seemed to know where he was going. Elijah forced the maintenance door open just enough for the group to pass through into a lower service hallway lined with exposed pipes and backup generators. The air felt cooler here. Cleaner. Claire noticed several workers huddled near the wall farther ahead. Janitors. Kitchen staff. Two interns wrapped in emergency blankets. Forgotten people from the lower floors nobody from the executive offices would normally even know by name. The moment Elijah saw them, he changed direction immediately. "Stay here," Claire said instinctively. "We need to reach the evacuation route." Elijah did not stop walking. "So do they." The sentence was simple. Matter of fact. Yet it hit Claire harder than she expected. Elijah crouched beside an older maintenance worker holding his wrist awkwardly against his chest. "You hurt?" The man nodded weakly. "Slipped during the lockdown." Elijah checked the arm carefully without panic. "Probably sprained. Nothing broken." Then he removed the emergency wrap from his own supply pouch and secured the wrist with practiced hands. One of the interns stared at him. "Why are you helping us first?" Elijah glanced up briefly. "Because scared people make dangerous decisions when they feel invisible." Claire stood several feet away watching all of it beneath the red emergency lights. The executives behind her looked impatient. Restless. But Elijah never rushed. Not once. He moved from person to person quietly, checking breathing, guiding people towards safer airflow, handing his flashlight briefly to a frightened cafeteria worker so she could stop shaking long enough to drink water. Nobody important by Whitmore Tower standards. Yet Elijah treated them like their lives weighed exactly the same as everyone else's upstairs. Claire realized then how rarely she had ever seen kindness without an audience attached to it. Suddenly a loud electronic tone echoed through the hallway. Every emergency monitor along the wall flashed at once. "System purge in 10 minutes. Airflow reset initiating." One of the executives cursed loudly. "What does purge mean?" Elijah's eyes darkened immediately. "It means the building is preparing to isolate oxygen circulation between sectors." Panic spread through the workers instantly. Questions collided into each other. Voices rose. Somebody started crying softly near the wall. Then Elijah stepped into the middle of the hallway and raised one hand. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady. "Everybody listen to me." The corridor slowly quieted. "We are getting out," he said firmly. "But panic burns oxygen faster than smoke does." Claire watched the room settle around his voice again. Not completely calm. Just calmer. Enough to move forward. Elijah turned toward the emergency stairwell ahead, then stopped suddenly. His radio clip to his belt crackled for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Static hissed through the speaker before a weak voice broke through. "If anybody hears this, there are still people trapped on 58. Silence followed. Elijah closed his eyes briefly. Just once. Then he looked toward the stairwell leading upward instead of down. Claire felt the shift immediately. "No," she said quietly. "You cannot go higher." Elijah met her eyes across the red-lit corridor. Tired. Calm. Certain. "I cannot leave them there either." The hallway went silent after Elijah spoke. Not because people agreed with him. Because deep down they already knew he was going to go no matter what anyone said. Claire stepped toward him slowly while the red emergency lights painted tired shadows across her face. "You already brought everyone this far," she said quietly. "Someone else can reach them." Elijah glanced toward the stairwell leading higher into the tower. Smoke drifted faintly beneath the steel door now. "There is no one else up here." The words landed with uncomfortable truth. Outside, the storm rattled against the skyscraper windows while somewhere far below sirens echoed through downtown Chicago. But inside Whitmore Tower, Elijah Brooks stood alone between trapped strangers and a building turning against itself. Claire hated how much she suddenly understood that. One of the executives stepped forward nervously. "This is insane. We should keep moving down." Elijah nodded once. "You should." Then he looked toward the frightened workers gathered near the wall. "Service stairs are 2 floors below. Stay together. Do not run." He handed the flashlight to the older maintenance worker with the injured wrist. "Keep the beam low so everybody sees the steps." The man looked startled. "What about you?" Elijah adjusted the strap on his turnout jacket and checked the emergency axe clipped along his side. I know the way without it. Claire watched him prepare to turn back toward the smoke. Calm. Efficient. Like risking himself for strangers was not bravery anymore but habit. Something inside her tightened unexpectedly. Elijah. He paused at the sound of his name in her voice. It was the first time she had said it all night. Claire swallowed once before speaking again. You do not owe this building anything. Elijah studied her quietly beneath the dim red lights. Maybe not the building. Then his eyes shifted briefly toward the workers behind her. But people are different. Nobody spoke after that. Because there was nothing cleaner than the truth when spoken by someone who lived it. Elijah pushed open the stairwell door and thick heat rolled instantly into the hallway. Not flames. Just trapped heat and smoke pressing downward from the upper floors. Claire stepped forward before she could stop herself. Wait. Elijah looked back. She stared at him for one long second like she was trying to memorize the face of someone she had judged too quickly. The soot along his jaw. The exhaustion beneath his eyes. The pink bracelet brushing his wrist every time he moved. Human details. Real details. Not categories. Not assumptions. Please come back down, she said softly. Elijah's expression changed almost invisibly at the word please. Not surprise. More like sadness that kindness always sounded unfamiliar coming from frightened people. I will try, he answered honestly. Then he disappeared upward into the smoke. Claire stood frozen beside the stairwell long after the door shut behind him. The corridor suddenly felt colder without him there. One of the interns whispered quietly. He is really going alone? Claire stared at the steel door. No, she said after a moment. The words surprised even her. Then she reached for the emergency flashlight hanging beside the wall and tightened her coat around her shoulders. One executive stepped forward immediately. Claire, what are you doing? She looked toward the smoke-filled stairwell where Elijah had vanished. The first decent man I have met in years just walked back into danger alone. Her voice stayed calm now. Certain in a way it had not been all night. I am not letting him do that by himself. Before anyone could stop her, Claire Whitmore opened the stairwell door and followed the black firefighter upward into the dark. By the time Claire caught up to Elijah on the 56th floor, the smoke had thickened enough to blur the emergency lights into soft red halos along the stairwell walls. Elijah turned instantly at the sound of footsteps behind him. What are you doing here? Claire stopped 2 steps below him, slightly out of breath but steady. Making a bad decision, apparently. Even through the smoke, Elijah almost smiled at that. Almost. Then another weak transmission crackled through the radio clipped near his shoulder. Coughing. Static. A frightened voice repeating the same thing. Conference room, 58. Elijah looked upward again. No hesitation left now. They climbed together through the dim stairwell, while the building groaned softly around them like steel under pressure. Somewhere above, emergency vents hissed open and shut. Claire kept one hand against the rail while following the beam of Elijah's flashlight through the haze. How are you still this calm? She asked quietly between breaths. Elijah did not answer immediately. Because panic does not help people breathe. Such a simple sentence. Yet Claire knew entire boardrooms full of powerful men who sounded less grounded than this tired firefighter climbing smoke-filled stairs in worn boots. When they reached the 58th floor, the hallway doors had sealed halfway shut beneath the lockdown system. Elijah forced them open enough to squeeze through into a dark conference wing washed in red emergency light. 4 employees huddled near the far wall beside shattered computer monitors and overturned office chairs. One young man looked barely older than 22. Thank God, he whispered when he saw them. Elijah moved immediately. Checking breathing. Guiding people toward cleaner air near the floor. Calm hands. Calm voice. Claire knelt beside a young woman shaking uncontrollably near the conference table. You are okay, she said softly, surprising herself with how much she meant it now. Not because she believed the situation was safe. Because Elijah did. And somehow that confidence had spread to her too. Minutes later, they finally reached the lower evacuation route where firefighters from outside had broken through the lockdown barriers. Fresh air rushed through the corridor. Real air. The kind people forget to appreciate until they almost lose it. One by one, survivors moved down towards safety while paramedics waited below. Dawn had begun to break over Chicago by the time Claire stepped outside Whitmore Tower. Rain still clung to the streets in silver pools beneath flashing emergency vehicles. Reporters crowded behind barricades. Executives shouted into borrowed phones. But Claire barely noticed any of it. Her eyes searched the scene until she found Elijah sitting alone on the back step of an ambulance near the curb. His turnout jacket hung open now, smoke-stained and damp from sweat. Exhaustion sat heavily across his shoulders while he held a paper cup of black coffee between both hands. A little girl's voice crackled softly from the phone resting beside him. "Did you save everybody, Daddy?" Elijah looked down at the screen and smiled tiredly. "We got them out, baby girl." Claire stood there quietly for a long moment watching him. Then she walked over and held out another cup of coffee from the emergency stand nearby. Elijah looked up at her in surprise. Claire gave the smallest shrug. "Figured you might need a refill." Elijah accepted the cup carefully. "Thank you, ma'am." Claire looked toward the sunrise reflecting across the glass tower behind them. Then back at the man she almost ignored hours earlier. "It is Claire," she said softly. Elijah nodded once. The city kept moving around them while sirens faded slowly into morning traffic. But for the first time in years, Claire Whitmore sat beside someone who made power feel small and kindness feel enormous.